What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 158 of Nintendo Noise, Split Screen Games' weekly Nintendo podcast. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined today by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. Good to be back.
Yeah,
together. We're both, we've both been on the show, but I know I've said that like the last 3 weeks, and then it's like, how many? We don't need to legislate which one of us was here or not.
I can't remember if I was here last week for Nintendo Noise or not. I genuinely don't.
But we're together. We're here. We're talking about Nintendo. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, the OG crew back together. Talk about Nintendo being bullies again.
Chewy notwithstanding.
Chewy's written into the question block, so he is here.
Oh, he's here in spirit. That's great.
Yeah, he's here in spirit. He's just not on mic.
Yeah. Well, he's in the all three of us moved this year. He's moving right now. So hopefully when he's settled in his new place, we'll get him back on. Yeah, we were going to do Splatoon a couple weeks ago, and I'm sorry, I'm moving, guys. I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
But
that man moves around all the time.
He's a traveler, a world traveler. Yeah, nomad. That's a good way to put it. I was going to say a vagabond, but I feel like that has a connotation that I'm not trying to put on him, Isn't
that a homeless person?
Or, I don't know. Maybe, but I think of it as more of like you're you're a transient kind of person. Like you're like moving around all the time, Maybe I'm using the word wrong though. So I'm going to bail out of this one and just get us into our topic here today, because Switch emulation is back in the news, and for all the wrong reasons. And it looks like once again Nintendo is just stomping the big heavy boot down on Switch emulation.
Yeah, so we had the news obviously back in March. They sued Yuzu out of existence, which I think is fair to say that was probably the most popular emulator. It was the most kind of most compatible, and they would always make sure games were ready for launch. The emulator was ready for games when they came out on launch day. Now, competitor Ryujinx, which was really kind of the last man standing when Yuzu disappeared.
And I feel like I remember that being the one that everybody was pointing to when Yuzu went down. It's like, well, Ryujinx is still around, so you still have options, right?
Yeah, and we'll get to what may or may not happen towards the end of the conversation, but the GitHub page mysteriously vanished this week, and everyone was wondering what the hell was going on. Was this a DMCA takedown? Had Nintendo issued a legal request to GitHub to take the page down? That seems like it's not the case. The GitHub page doesn't make any reference to DMCA takedown, which it would usually. It's not on their list of DMCA takedowns that they publish as part of their kind of transparency policy. And the Discord server's still up, which is different to Yuzu. They shut down the GitHub. They shut down the Discord. They issued takedowns for both of those. And
their website's still up too.
The website for Ryujinx is up. If you go to the download page, it's now completely blank. Doesn't show anything at all. So it was very strange. No one knew what the hell was going on. And then Ryujinx posted a screenshot from their Discord server and obviously announced it in their Discord server. And I'll let you read it out, Pete, basically just explaining what was going on.
Okay, so this was posted on the official Ryujinx Twitter account, and it says, and it's a screenshot from their Discord that says, yesterday, GDK-chan was contacted by Nintendo and offered an agreement to stop working on the project, remove the organization, and all related assets he's in control of. While awaiting confirmation on whether he would take this agreement, the organization has been removed. So I think it's safe to say what the outcome is. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but I thought that was a funny way to put that. Rather than leave you with only panic and speculation, I decided to write this short message to give some closure. These words are my own. I don't want to speak for anyone else here, so just remember that while reading. Thank you to everyone who has contributed code, documentation, or issue reports to the project. Thank you all for following us throughout the development. I was able to learn a lot of really neat things about games that I love, enjoy them with renewed qualities, and in unique circumstances. And I'm sure you all have experiences that are similarly special. I'm extending my own massive thanks to our moderation team who've been here through some rough circumstances and always found ways to make light of it.
Yeah, so it's pretty kind of black and white that the project's gone. Obviously, people will still have copies of it on their own um, personal computers. It may end up getting forked online. We saw that happen with Yuzu. Yuzu became Suyu. That is still up and it's still in active development. It's hosted on their own servers where Nintendo haven't issued takedown notices for that, but I kind of feel that maybe that's a matter of time. I think the most curious comment in this statement is the agreement. Like, what is that agreement? What do we think that may be? Is it financial incentive? Is it we're basically gonna do what we did to Yuzu and we're gonna sue you into oblivion if you don't take it
Yeah,
down?
I think it's probably that. I think it's probably a thinly veiled threat, right? Like I can't speak to how this works in international law, right? But I know that like in the States, for example, right, like you can receive a legal notice from a lawyer, for example, and it's no one has taken legal action against you or anything like that. That's like what a cease and desist is, right? Like it's hey, like we're warning you that if you continue doing what you're doing, we're going to sue you. And, if you want us to leave you alone, these are the terms that we're asking for, right? Like, that's probably what happened here is they probably, said, like, we'll do to you what we did to Yuzu. We'll come after you in court, and even if, GDK-chan could win, it's like, do you want to be in court for years over an emulator? Like, do you want to,
No,
potentially...
especially if you're not making much any money or much money from it.
Right.
I mean, Yuzu's maybe a different a different kind of use case where it was really the fact that they had a Patreon with their early bird, which Ryujinx does too. They're pulling in around just over $1,000 a month. Nowhere near what Yuzu was pulling in. They were pulling in, I think, around 10 times that at the point where it was shut down. And unlike Yuzu, they don't release patches before like a game is actually released. So that was Nintendo's point with Yuzu, was it's clear you are using piracy in order to develop this product because you've got access to games before they've even been released. So you can't have circumvented some kind of copy protection or dumped these ROMs yourself. You must have got them from the internet. You must have stolen them. That doesn't seem to be the case with Ryujinx, and I think a lot of people thought it was pretty much untouchable. The rumor was that GDK-chan was based in Brazil, which has been known to be very emulation friendly. And more than that, the emulator itself was developed in what's called a clean room, where they didn't look at any of Nintendo's source code or basically jailbreak a switch. They just looked at the game source, like once they dumped the ROM, and kind of reverse engineered it piece by piece, put their own kind of code on top of it, which usually was very different to that. It required you to download a firmware and add that to Yuzu, and it used that directly in order to emulate.
And I remember when we were talking about it, back in March, right? Like that was kind of what you had, identified as kind of the smoking gun, right? Where it's like, well, that is you violating copyright law, right? Like you are, illegally using a bit of code. And emulation isn't illegal, but stealing someone's code to do it and then profit from it is, right? And
which is the kind of precedent that's been set, like all the way back from in the PlayStation 1 era. You had to get the BIOS files in order to kind of add that to your emulator in order to get it to work. Prior to that, kind of no console really had any kind of form of BIOS. It didn't have that built-in operating system, but that's obviously not the case anymore.
Yeah, I think it's... I think this is one where like it doesn't necessarily seem like there's actually any... I mean, unless I guess Nintendo knows something that we don't, right? Like, which is totally possible.
Yeah, which they did with Yuzu. I mean, they were in the Discord. They were in those secret channels that people didn't realize Nintendo was lurking there and finding ROMs being swapped back and forth for unreleased games.
Right. So, like, who's to say, right? Like, it could be a thing where, like, maybe they can prove that there was that kind of activity was still going on, and that, like, their argument is that, like, look, even if you did develop it in a, a clean room environment, right, and you didn't break the law in that way, like your Discord is still, furthering piracy of our software, and you're paying, charging people for access to something that they're using to then steal our like, I think that is ultimately where they're like, these organizations are getting tripped up, right? Because I think kind of pre-Nintendo Switch emulation, I guess with the exception of Dolphin maybe at different points in times, right? It's like, a lot of emulators were not developed for stuff that was contemporary, and
there has been like CMU when the Wii U was out. That was
that's
kind
true.
of available.
Yeah, that was true.
Citra, the 3DS was available, and that was the Yuzu team. So Citra's also gone away.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's true. That like, Citra's a weird one because it was already like, the 3DS was gone when they went after it, which I think is.
I think it was just because it was the same team.
It's
we're coming at you for Yuzu.
Might as well
take down Citra too.
Right. True. Yeah. I guess it's more like they were going after the organization, so it's like it's caught in the crosshairs, or in the crossfire, I should say. But yeah, it's definitely a thing where I think it seemed like Ryujinx was doing it in such a way where they were able to kind of, skirt some of the legal concerns, and whether it's because Nintendo does feel like they could take them to court and win, or because they think that they could just bleed them dry, and it doesn't really matter if they have a case, that they just have more legal.
I kind of feel like if they did have a case, we'd have seen it. They're not afraid to just use their lawyers, who they've clearly got on salary, to just pull up some case notes and fire it over. They did that with Yuzu. It wasn't like they sent the lead developers of Yuzu a nice friendly email with an agreement to say,
no, but if you recall though,
this.
that was part of that reporting, was like they did actually offer them a deal and they were like, nah, and then they sued them. Right? Like, wasn't what? Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was what happened. Right? Was that he didn't respond, and then that was when they actually took the lawsuit, like, against them, and there was like, okay, well, we have proof that you broke the law, like, from your Discord, right? And it's like, okay, you got us. I don't know. Maybe it's that simple, right? Maybe it's that there is more to this than we're aware of, and it's something that is as cut and dry as there is a way in which they're breaking. They're violating Nintendo's copyright, but yeah, I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if you're right there, that they are confident that they can just bully them and just make it go away.
I mean, unlike Yuzu, which had formed an LLC, they had that legal protection there, where it was the company that was being sued rather than the individual. This is just a one person's project that a lot of people have contributed to, and that's one person that takes all of that responsibility on, rather than an organization that takes the responsibility on as the legal entity. So it's very different in that situation.
Like,
I do.
Think about what they did to Doug Bowser, or not Doug Bowser.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh no, is it Gary
Bowser?
Gary Bowser. I'm like, Doug. They're not both named Doug Bowser. That would be crazy. Yeah, Gary Bowser, right? Where it's like, you don't want to be made an example of. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it.
I mean, it's. I think it's a shame, and we'll go into the kind of ethics about it and what we think of our opinions. But Ryujinx also listed some of the things that they were working on that Twitter thread that aren't ever going to see the light of day now. There was an iOS port, there was an Android port, there was peer-to-peer networking, so you could connect to an actual Switch and play multiplayer games with it. So you can emulate a game and also play that game on your Switch at the same time. They'd poured it over to Vulkan from OpenGL, so it was more performant on devices like the Steam Deck. And there were over 100 unmerged pull requests from contributors that have now just disappeared. They're gone. And that code's never going to come back because the organization's been completely deleted from GitHub. So that code is lost unless a fork shows up online and people decide to contribute to that instead.
It's a shame.
Yeah, it's a real shame. I don't like this. I don't see that there's any illegality in creating an emulator and reverse engineering something. That precedent's been set time and time again in court. And Nintendo's lost in court over it. Sony's lost in court over it with Bleem. There's been so many cases where this has been tried and tested. there's got to be, if there was some kind of agreement in place that seemingly there was, there's got to be more to the story, I think.
Well, I want to pull in some comments from the listeners because people were split on it. I think that there are people who kind of wrote in passionately for both sides, and I want to bring in some of their thoughts. So Cold Soul wrote in on Discord and said, it's a scummy move on Nintendo's part to shut down Ryujinx and Yuzu, but I can kind of understand why. The Switch is still a fairly modern console, and they still sell physical games for it. However, I don't see why they try and shut down all emulation of older Nintendo games. I mean, these consoles are 20, 30 years old, and the physical media isn't even available for purchase anymore. Which is
another story we'll get to in the back half of this show.
Yeah, this is a pretty tough one if you're somebody who's into emulation today. It's Nintendo's going hard. And then on the other side of the fence, Chemical Flood wrote in and said, Ryujinx deserves it. You can't emulate games before they're even sold. It's full-on piracy at this point. Any company who isn't brain dead would have asked them to stop.
And to be fair, any company would ask them to stop, whether you agree to those terms or not. I mean, if you are Ryujinx or Yuzu and you think, well, what we're doing is built in a clean room, we've just reverse engineered code, there's nothing illegal that's happened here, why would you stop? Because you've not done anything illegal. I understand the piracy side of things, and obviously that's what 99% of these emulators are being used for, is for people pirating games.
Well, and I think, again, particularly with something that's like modern, like, yeah, it's like, I mean, like, why would you, why else would you be emulating a Switch? Right? Like, and it's like, granted,
there are reasons. I mean, we saw this week there was footage that actually got taken down from YouTube and has caused someone to get a copyright strike of the new Zelda game, Echoes of Wisdom, running on a PC, or I think it was on a Steam Deck, and it runs with a much better, smoother frame rate. So there are reasons you might want to get more performance out of a device. You might want to run it at higher resolutions than the Switch is currently possible at doing.
I think the problem with that as a defense, though, is that how many of those people are actually buying the game and then doing that?
Yeah, that is the problem.
Because, like, I would guess it's probably less than 5%, right?
Yeah, that would be my guess. Like, I think it's probably more than that. I think it's probably not. I can't imagine it's any less than like 98, 99% of people that have bothered to dump the ROMs themselves, because you've got to hack your Switch, then you've got to dump the ROMs, you've got to get them in the right format, you've got to get them onto the device you actually want to play them on. It's a hassle. That's where
I think, not to defend Nintendo, but to, I guess, like, echo a little bit of what Chemical Flood is saying here, is that, like, I find myself feeling a little frustrated with the developers behind Yuzu and Ryujinx, because I think that this was pretty predictable outcome for doing this kind of piracy and charging money for it, and they have put all of emulation at risk to make a few $1,000s on Patreon. And I think that that's...
But why do you not feel that way about Dolphin and Cemu?
Because I think that when you're talking about something that's like a few generations removed, Nintendo and other, publishers, whatever, copyright holders, right? Not to say that they haven't gone after projects like that, right? Like, they've gone after plenty of fan games and ROM sites. Like, that's what took down Gary Bowser, right? But I think that, there are a lot of ways for you to get access to those things in ways that, like, don't rub them the wrong way as much, right? Like, it's like, and I don't want to, like, I don't want to talk about what those ways are too much, because I don't want to be accused of directing people how to go practice piracy.
I do really think, though, that Nintendo has to take some responsibility for it.
No, I'm not. But that's a different point. You asked me why I think they're different, and I think the difference is that, like, in a lot of those cases, right, like the websites that do get taken down, there's some financial incentive, and that usually ends up being the silver bullet that puts them in trouble, right? Is like, you're selling ad space, you're charging for a Patreon, you're, providing, like, again, even like that example of, like, the peer-to-peer thing. It's like, so you're telling me that you are going to be enabling you to be able to play online games on a device that's not a Nintendo. Like, of course Nintendo is going to try to stop you from doing that. And I think the idea that, like, why I think it's different is that I think that the more removed you are from it being an active consumer product that affects their bottom line, the less likely they are to go after you. It's the same conversation that we have had about, like, Etsy sellers, right? And it was something that got brought up by the lawyer in the lawsuit that we were citing with Pal World a week or two ago, right? Where, like, the difference between those things is publicity, is the money that's coming in and stuff, right? It's that, like, if Nintendo was going to go sue every single small business owner that violated their copyright by selling, like, Mario scarves or whatever, right, on Etsy, it would take them forever, and it wouldn't actually make them any money. It wouldn't defend their bottom line in a significant way. It's like, it's ultimately just not worth it. And that's, the sweet spot that video game preservation needs to operate in if we want to keep being able to get away with violating copyright, because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. And I have dozens of times on this show advocated for ethical piracy. And I think that there is we have a comment here. It's from your dad, who said there's a massive difference between emulating a game you own or a game that no longer exists to emulating a brand new game. And I think that that's the difference. And I think that, we can sit here and argue the kind of minutia of, like, emulation is legal, so, like, this should be fine. It's like, I agree with you as a person, right? But, like, you can't only talk about these things in terms of, like, ethics in a vacuum, because we don't live in a world in a vacuum, right? Like, these things are going to go to court, and, like, if they win a lawsuit against one of these emulators, they set a legal precedent in the same way that the one that you're talking about from back in, like, 96 or whatever, like, that defends emulators to this day. Guess what? It takes one lawsuit that changes legal precedent. You saw it happen with sampling. You've seen it happen with plenty of different things that used to be okay, that used to be a thing that we took for granted, and a couple people, like, with an axe to grind, go after somebody and win a lawsuit, and it changes the rules forever. And we could very, very quickly end up in a world where all emulation is much, much more difficult to come by, or is next to impossible without breaking the law, or like, risking, getting a letter from Nintendo at your door when you want to play a game that's been out of print for 30 years, and, like, that's what I think we're risking by people who don't feel like playing their games on Nintendo Switch at the right frame rate, right? Or who are, like, being stingy and being like, I don't want to pay Nintendo for this game. Well, then it's like, well, if you don't want to pay for it, then don't play it, And it's like, I think when you ask me what's the difference, it's like, well, like, you can't go buy a lot of games that exist on old hardware anymore, right? Like Cold Soul said, it's like, there's all these reasons.
I could play the remastered version
if it exists, but if it doesn't, then. It exists.
But my point with Dolphin was that got released in 2003, so that was during the period where the GameCube and the Wii were still active consoles.
And if Nintendo had gone after them, then I would have said the same thing. That it's like, I think you're asking for trouble by creating a product that primarily exists to pirate software that is readily available for sale. I think that is way different than abandonware, and we did a whole episode about abandonware, right? Like, it's like, if copyright holders are not making their product available, then it's a legally gray area sometimes, or an ethically gray area. I don't even think it's ethically gray in that situation. I think it's totally fine to do. But yeah, it's like, I think when you get beyond that, right, it's like you're doing things that are, like, dicey, and kind of just being like, well, fuck it. And, like, it's great that, seemingly anyway, right, that, like, GDK-chan is not going to get in trouble for this, because I don't want there to be a human cost for emulation or ROMs or whatever, right? I think it's really sad.
What that agreement is. I hope that agreement doesn't involve GDK-chan having to hand any funds over to Nintendo, but it may well.
Who's to say?
But Nintendo has not confirmed or denied this. The Verge reached out to them, and they just sent them to spokesperson at the ESA instead, who then said that she couldn't speak to on the behalf of Nintendo and to go back to speak to them.
I thought it was funny. It was Sean Hollister from The Verge, and it's just like, I guess I got the runaround. Like, it's like very funny. It's like, yeah, all right, fair enough. I guess that's it. So that's my whole thing about it, right? Is like I don't think that Nintendo is they're a bully. Like, they're absolutely a bully. I think Cold Soul saying it's a scummy move to do this kind of thing is like, I don't think that that's out of line to say. And like, to Chemical Flood's point, like, I think when you're doing it with like hardware that is still literally it's on shelves, it's literally their primary profit driver, that it's like, to Chemical Flood's point, like, yeah, like, of course, like, they literally, what else were they gonna do? Just ignore it? It's like, no, like, they're a business. It's not their job.
They ignored it for 8 years.
Yeah, but it's like, again, it's like, I think that, like, there's an argument to be made there that, like, in the beginning, not enough people were using it. And, like, in a pre-Steam Deck world, it was less popular, right? But it's like, you could download EmuDeck and just, like, in 3 clicks be playing Switch games on your Steam Deck. And I'm sure that led a lot more people to try it, And, like, all these YouTube videos that, like, for years and years they ignored. It's like, well, like, the whatever the straw was, that camel's back is broken, right? And, like, they are being more and more aggressive and litigious about this kind of stuff. And I think that anybody that's in this business needs to, like, the business of making emulators, right? Like, or hosting them or hosting ROMs, like, needs to be smarter about this and, like, be doing this stuff. Like, you were talking about this, about the software patents, right? Like, where it's like the roots of this kind of computing are not supposed to be profit motivated. And I think that, like, having a Patreon where you make thousands of dollars a month so that you can basically give, it's like one of those, to me, this is like not different than if I was like, you remember there was like that thing a couple months ago or last year or wherever, where like everybody was like using this very simple, like, fucking NFT tag or whatever to like hack into cars. It's like if I sold a book and a tool of like, here's how you hack into cars. And then it's like, well, I'm not hacking into cars. I didn't break the law. It's not illegal for me to make a tool that allows people to steal cars. It's like, but yeah, like, what are you doing though? Right? Like,
I mean, it's not like lockpicks exist. They've existed for
you're
like
right,
100 years.
But it's like, I think that
it's the same argument with guns.
That's a whole other thing. That's like, that goes so deep.
Open that can of worms.
Yeah, and it's like, if you want my opinion, yeah. I don't disagree with you, right? But, like, I think that what is the legitimate use of this tool aside from, like, to your point, being like, well, I want to play this game on PC. Well, Nintendo doesn't want you to do that. So, like, get over it. Like, you're not entitled to do that, Like, and I think it's cool that people have figured that out, and I'm not against it personally, but acting like it's like a moral high ground that you should be allowed to illegally download games and mess with their frame rates is ridiculous. And, like, if you paid for the game and you actually dumped the files yourself and you did it the legal, correct way, then have at it, my friend, But, like, we both know the vast majority of people using this, we're not doing that. And we're not paying for the games at all.
I've never dumped a ROM in my life apart from a PS1 game because they were easy. You put them in your disk drive and
literally just
there the files were.
It was awesome. Yeah, I did do that.
I do think Nintendo needs to bear some of the blame for how rife piracy has got. Their device was easily hackable with a fucking paperclip. That was ridiculous. And that should have never happened.
No.
And they upload their games to the eShop way, way, way before they are actually released. And they're completely accessible. You can download the files if you have a hacked Switch. Like, they should have closed those loopholes a long time ago, come up with a solution so that doesn't happen. Because you don't see this happen on an Xbox, on a PS5. And we didn't even see it in the last generation on the Xbox One or the PS4. It just didn't happen.
Yeah, you're right, but like to say that they like deserve some of the blame to me, like, and again, like I hate having to fucking take this side in an argument, but it feels a little bit like victim blaming to be like, oh yeah, you should have done a better job protecting yourself from us breaking the law and then making money off of, it's like the difference between like back in the day when people would do that kind of shit, they would be like, oh, we took the PSN network down, fuck you, whereas like now it's like, oh, I made a Patreon where I'm gonna show you how to. It's like, dude, like, of course you're gonna get in trouble for that. It's like think for 5 seconds.
Yeah, I mean that's a legal thing I'd like to see in court, and I'm sure it will get tried at some point. Is Patreon donations, can they be counted as funding development? Can they be counted as like this is purchasing a product, or am I just donating to a person because I like their work? It would be an interesting thing to see, and I would imagine at some point we will see. I can't see that this is going to be the only time an emulator gets taken down by Nintendo. I'm sure another one will spring up, and then another.
I think a lot of these ones that charge money are going to go down. Like there's one that I use on Android that's called like Pizza Boy or something like that, and they have like a premium version that they charge for that's ad free. It's like, I mean, yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised if they started going after people like that, because it's like, it's not illegal to emulate this stuff, right? And I think that there is a legal precedent that shows that, and them overturning that is going to be a challenge, I think, right? But I think they can set a legal precedent that you're not allowed to make money off of it.
I don't know. That's tricky. That
why
to me doesn't sit right. Like I think anyone who's putting in hard work when they're programming deserves to get something back. And I don't think, say, a Game Boy emulator so I can play Pokemon on my phone is in any way similar to what's going on with Ryujinx.
I agree with you, but I think that is the thing that they're going to try to achieve here, is that they're going to try to make it so that like working on emulators is not something that makes you money, that you cannot like get financial, benefit from violating their copyright or circumnavigating their copyright or, whatever, right? Like creating this stuff is going to have to be something that's done by passion, and that will slow it down. There's less financial. No, but I think that's the point, right? Is that like, I don't think they actually care that much about it broadly, right? Like I think you're right that there is a difference between you using it to play a game on the Game Boy that they haven't sold in, now at this point, you haven't been able to buy it since the 3DS shop went down, right? There's no new way to buy
was a really
those
ridiculous
games.
one for me. Like there was no way to buy anything from the 3DS. If you wanted to even say live stream something on Twitch or even have a capture card, you had to get a modded device, which I think they tried to shut those people down. I think we spoke about that a couple of weeks ago, that they were shutting down console modders. I know that's illegal in Japan. But Chewy got one, right? It was so he could play Animal Crossing and he could stream it on Twitch.
And make videos.
The only other solution was to use an emulator for that, so you could capture the screen.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that's the thing, right? Is like I am pro emulator. I'm not sitting here saying I think emulators are bad, and I have never emulated a modern console. I think that there is a difference, and I think that these guys have skirted the law for a while, and I think Nintendo's dropping the boot, and I don't think that makes them like the good guy or anything like that. I don't think there are necessarily good guys and bad guys in this story, as much as I think people want to look at it that way. And I'm sure there are going to be people who are hearing this and saying I'm being a shill and I'm a fanboy and I'm defending them, and fair enough if that's how you feel. I think that ultimately, if it were up to me, right, like the law would dictate that this was something that was, legally protected, and that like the people who are actually violating the law are the people who are, hosting and trading ROMs of these games that are actively available,
which
right?
Which is the actual thing that is illegal currently, because that's sharing copyrighted material.
But I think that's where this new era of emulators is a little bit dicey, because Ryujinx and Yuzu are not just an emulator that you can go download on GitHub or Android Marketplace or whatever, right? And then go find ROMs. Like, they're communities that are monetized, and they have Discords where people are sharing files and actively, promoting and encouraging and enabling piracy, which, like, again,
Would that not be covered by the DMCA though? Like I can't remember what clause it is that allow basically anything that's uploaded to a website. It's not the kind of website holder's responsibility.
no, I don't think it is, because I think there's a difference. Like, it's like that guy when we talked about Yuzu in March, right? There was that Reddit community, right, where it was like somebody who was like actively being like, I'm proud.
Hey, which one do you want? Yeah,
Yeah, I'm proudly helping you violate the law because fuck Nintendo, and vote on what game you want me to steal next. Send me a copy and I'll upload. You know, it's like, yeah, it's like, no, inciting other people to commit a crime is a crime. You know, and again, I'm not saying that I think that guy deserved to go to jail or lose a bunch of money or anything either. I don't think that Nintendo going after these people is righteous, but they're a business with lawyers. Like, that's what they're gonna do, right? Like, it's like you're stealing from them from their point of view, and I think that, like, there's not really a great argument to be made that you're not, unless you're going out and paying for the games and dumping them yourself. In which case, guess what? You're in an extreme minority that is doing this totally
correctly,
white hat ethically, right? And you can point to that argument as much as you want, but if Nintendo has data that shows that, like, we can see all these copies of games that are still getting pirated and played on this emulator now, it's like, yeah, I mean, what else do you expect them to do?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm curious, where do you think this goes? Chewy wrote in and said, will Switch emulation be possible in the future, or do you think this console might be a gap in emulation?
No, I think it'll definitely be possible in the future. I think it'll just be exactly what I said, right? Emulation is not illegal. And I think that if somebody, to your point, right, like, there's that other dump of Yuzu that you were just, Suyu. Like, that's there, right? And it's like, who knows? They might go after them, but, like, if it exists just in that way that I talked about, where it's on a GitHub page and all it exists as is an emulator and there's no monetization
That's exactly what it is.
model.
And they don't have a public Discord. They don't talk about sharing pirated files.
Then guess what? They have a legally sound defense if Nintendo comes after them, right? In this case, I think the reason that you're backing down in the situation is because you're afraid you're going to lose.
Or you just can't be bothered.
Yeah.
You've been working, GDK Chan's been working on this, I think, since 2018. Yeah, it's a long time.
It's like enough's enough, right?
To a single project. Why not? If Nintendo's saying, right, okay, we're going to come after you and maybe ruin your life, that threat enough is just like, do we really care? Do we really need to keep doing this?
Yeah. Well, and like we said, even, right, like, there's the whole, like, reality that they could even they don't even have to win. Right? Like, they can just take you to court and you don't have as much money as they do because they're a multi-million-dollar corporation and they can just bleed you dry, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's literally not worth it. So yeah, that's my prediction, is that, like, yeah, this will probably, send it back underground, and that'll probably be enough to make them ignore it, because it's not worth it going after every little guy that does it, because you can always mirror it somewhere else and start a new group with a new name with the same code.
The thing. That's what I really don't understand. It's like, it's kind of like shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. It's like, everyone's already got a copy of this. Hundreds of thousands of people around the world are using this.
Yeah, but it's the same. Like, it's the same thing that lawyer said, though. It's about creating the chilling effect. It's, I'm not going to make the next website because I don't want to be Gary Bowser. I'm not going to create a Patreon and try to monetize my Switch emulator that I created because I don't want to get, I don't want them to come after me like they did Ryujinx. And I think that's the point of this, as much as it is to...
So that we don't see this for the Switch too.
Yeah, or that, like, I think they're trying to kill the culture of you can make a living or you can make money off of just violating our copyright, right? Or, like, taking advantage of the lack of, the thing you were saying, the lack of layers of security, right? And being like, it's not on us to create that defense. It's on us to create an environment where you're afraid to screw with us. Which is, again, it's not cool to create a culture of fear. You know?
No, I mean, and it's not just with emulators that they're doing that culture of fear, though, right? They're also doing it over on YouTube now.
Yes, and let's talk about that in just a second here. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of Nintendo Noise is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of October. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Lenz, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and Also Boobies, Ty the Dude, Voodoo Vic, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. Y'all the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to check out those sister shows, the Steam Deck podcast and the Flip Screen Games podcast, where we talk about what's going on in the world of console gaming outside Nintendo and PC gaming, go check them out. It's a great time. If you enjoyed this show, you'll like them too. I promise you that. That's the Flip Screen Games seal of approval, as Max dubbed it in the last episode. So go check those out. You'll have a good time. And of course, if you want to get involved in the community, if you want to go above and beyond and show us your support over on Patreon, you can go and head over to flipscreen.games. That's the website. You'll find it all over there. Go click on something, however you choose to get involved. Thank you for joining us here on another episode of Nintendo Noise. All right, so this is the latest in a kind of troubling line of them going after other smaller instances of copyright violation.
This, to me, is absolutely ridiculous, and I don't see how it's not deemed as fair use. So Russ from Retro Game Core, beloved creator, fantastic channel dedicated to emulation and kind of these little emulator handhelds, has done a ton of videos. His most recent video was taken down, and he received a second copyright strike, and he feels that he is now specifically being targeted by Nintendo, and so is going to have to change the way he makes videos. The reason the video was taken down, it had a couple of screenshots or a tiny little clip of Wind Waker from the Wii U playing on a little emulator handheld.
Yeah, and I think this is, another example of them trying to use whatever channels they can to bully somebody into feeling like, or in this case, right, like abusing YouTube's copyright system, to try to silence somebody from teaching people how to do emulation, making it more difficult and less accessible.
Yeah, which in this video specifically, Russ didn't even talk about that. It was reviewing the handheld, and he just showed a bunch of games playing and spoke about their performance. And one of those games,
yeah, and I'm sure it's just that they're like, well, this guy, is a huge channel, and everybody knows Retro Game Core. If you're at all interested in emulation, I'm sure you've come across one of Russ's videos at some point, right? Or if you've thought about jumping in on this like kind of golden age of Android emulators, right, that are all popping up all over the place now. Like you've probably come across him, and I imagine that this is just something that they're probably trying to quash, because they don't look at it as something that is beneficial to their business, right? Because it's empowering people to emulate, right? Emulation used to be harder to figure out. Right? When we were younger, it was a lot less accessible, and it took more steps and more research, and and now it's like,
remember the name of the emulator I used? It was like VB Boy or something.
VBA, Visual Boy Advance, of course.
Yeah.
And it's not like it was hard to use, but like you didn't know about it, right? Like you had to find it. Whereas now, if you were like, how do I play Pokemon on my phone? Like literally, you can download an app from the App Store and then click through 2 links on Reddit or something and and it's like, that's it, right? And like, I'm sure that they want to create a culture of fear, like I said, around emulation and ROMs.
Yeah, I hope it does end there. Obviously, this kind of makes me fear back in the day, the YouTube creator program where we all had to sign up if we wanted to use any of Nintendo's game footage or characters or anything like that.
And they'd take a percentage of everything you made, even if it didn't have their stuff in it.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane. And it felt like they were shifting away from that. And now maybe we're kind of going back. Russ has said that he's reluctant to open a can of worms, and as the next step would be to file legal action. But I hope he at least hits back at
Challenges,
this.
yeah,
Yeah,
because he
challenges
hasn't
this
done anything
copyright
wrong.
strike.
You know, I don't think there's any argument to be made that what he's doing is he's reviewing products. Like, if you don't like that the product exists, like, go after the person selling it, not a small business owner who's like ultimately, somebody who's a fan of your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about emulation of Wii U on, say, the Steam Deck podcast, and if we'd have shown a video or a clip of it working, maybe we'd have received.
There's a very
copyright
specific
strike.
reason I don't show footage as much as we used
Yeah.
to.
And Russ, I know, is one of the guys that does do it the right way. He always shows the physical media of the game that he's playing in the screen, because he's had problems with that before, to prove that he owns the game, and he dumps everything. He goes about it the right way. He does everything legitimately. I don't see how this copyright strike is in any way warranted, and I do hope it gets challenged. I think this is probably going to be this plus Ryujinx is probably going to just be the start of an onslaught against it.
Well, this actually, we have a comment here from from Doc that I want to get into in a second. But this actually comes from I want to pull from a story that I had a couple of weeks ago that we never got to, which was Nintendo was going after people that were selling sheet music arrangements of their songs as well. And they also just had another big round. This is something they've done a couple times of sending copyright strikes and purging channels that had video game soundtracks of their music.
Yeah, and I used to love listening to a bunch of those, and some of the ones I listened to just disappeared off the face of the earth, which sucks. I don't understand the laws around music. You do. We spoke about interpolation and stuff on last week's episode, but can you really copyright people not being able to print sheet music of a song? I guess you can, because you arranged it in that specific way and put those notes in that specific order.
So the thing that I think is so messed up about this was that the people that they went after were actually doing everything properly. They went after Sheet Music Boss and Purple's Chala, and they're YouTubers that do that. And there was yet another channel that I'm not seeing the name of, and I apologize. But the three sheet music channels they came together and are trying to get Nintendo to leave them alone, because they were licensed. And the original artists were getting a percentage of the sales of the score. So, they did everything legally. And, I think Nintendo is just going...
Nintendo, being a bully again.
Yeah, exactly. Just this is what they do. I think they go after people with these lawsuits, and they just want to see what sticks.
Which, if you've got an absolute mountain of cash in the bank like Nintendo does, why not? It stops people doing things. It has that chilling effect that you've spoken about, and people get scared to do anything. But I really think it hampers creativity. These sheet music arrangements is something really cool, and it's not something that Nintendo's offering, and they're not harming anyone. They're giving back to the original artists and the original musicians that wrote the music and played the music and arranged it.
It's only positive. It only furthers your stuff, right? It's
because people be playing it in public or whatever. That's the World 1-1 song. I know this one. This is cool. And people take a video, then it's on TikTok. It's it just spreads your stuff everywhere. And sometimes it just feels really short-sighted.
And I think it feels particularly scummy when they kind of trade in being good guy Nintendo. We love our fans, and we have this with this relationship with our fans, and you've had this relationship with the art your whole life, and we're a part of your life, and it's I can't imagine something that's a more pure expression of your love for the work than to make sheet music so other people can play it, and and it's you did it right. They didn't steal anything. They didn't, it's this is again, Colts, it's just scummy. It's scummy, mean behavior,
Yeah. I really hope it comes to an end at some point. I hope these three channels do eventually get Nintendo to kind of back down, especially as they're doing things the right way. I don't see them backing down when it comes to emulation on YouTube, but I feel like this is just now, it opens a can of worms. Like, first it's emulation, but what about something else they don't like next? What if it's a streamer who's streaming their game that they don't particularly like the language that they use?
And this is something that Doc said. I have no particularly well thought opinions other than Nintendo's being a bum ass, being a bum ass by nuking anything that even resembles their IP on YouTube, which is honestly part of the reason I stopped streaming. Yeah, I think it. I think short-sighted is a good way to put it, because I think that when you behave this way, you kind of do so at your own peril, because fan interaction and, cover songs and, like that stuff is like creates a culture around the IP and around the product, and makes people want to, do a podcast about it or listen to it, and it's like that stuff. It's all free marketing, right? And it's like, yeah, there are examples where it's like, them going after like the Metroid remake, right, when they were putting out a remake of the same game.
Yeah,
it's
it
like,
was up for ages. And then
all right, yeah, it's like
it
that sucks. It's not cool. But like, you can rationalize that. You can be like, I understand the business explanation for why you might do something like that. Even
Can't
I
play
think
that game anymore though. It's stuck on the 3DS. The shop's gone. There's no emulator to play it.
Yep, exactly. So it's like all for what, right? For one game to have a cleaner market. It's like, I don't think anybody that was playing that was gonna not then. It's like, come on, they're different audiences. But point being, there's stuff like that. There's stuff like this. The Yuzu situation where they were clearly helping people steal Tears of the Kingdom, right? Like, there are examples where it's like, I think you can, even if you don't like it, you can understand the decision, you can give it the benefit of the doubt. Then there's this other stuff where it's just like, it's just a bridge too far. It's aggressive in a way that feels very anti the very people that you're selling to, and not even in like a like you owe us something, right? Like, kind of way. I just mean like literally short-sighted from a business perspective of like, all right, fine, I'll go make sheet music about somebody else's music, and
I'll do a Crash Bandicoot arrangement.
Yeah, like whatever, right? Like, it's like
Astro Bot one,
and then nobody will be doing covers of your songs on TikTok. See how that works out for you, Yeah,
I mean, TikTok's everything for music and for marketing, and basically it's the place.
Yeah, and it's like, I think ultimately it's like it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and it's like you don't want to you don't want to court bad press over nothing, if you're going to go after the Ryujinx and the Yuzus of the world, fair enough, but going after Retro Game Core, going after these like YouTube channels that are making sheet music arrangements, it's like, what is the end goal here?
Yeah, and especially when you consider with Retro Game Core, like a YouTube strike, he'd already received one from Nintendo that got upheld. This is now a second one. If he has a third one within a certain time period, his channel's gone and it won't come back. Like, you get 3 strikes and you're out. And that's like his livelihood. This is what he does for a living. He's a YouTuber. And to basically threaten someone's livelihood by abusing the YouTube copyright system it's awful. I really don't like it at all.
Again, when they're not even really doing anything wrong, it's like, I don't think what they did to Gary Bowser was right. I don't think that got, like, that's, to me, feels kind of beyond right. But like, they had him dead to rights. Whereas like, Ross is not breaking the law, right? He owns the game. He's dumping the files. He's following all the rules. And it's like, because YouTube has a kind of primitive system that favors the copyright holder, they can just bully him. And it's like, that's not right. That's not fair. And it's not a good look.
No, do better, Nintendo. Do better.
Yeah. Who says we're on their side? Come on. Right? We're on the side of you, the player, okay? Power to the people. All right, anyway. Thanks, guys, for joining us on another one of these. We love doing the show. We love you for tuning in. This has been Nintendo Noise. If you want to keep up with us, if you want to check out our sister shows, if you want to go show your support or join the community and keep the conversation rolling, however you want to get involved, you can do all that and much more by heading over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you'll find all the places we are, all over the web, however you choose to get involved. Thank you for being here and tuning in to another episode of the show. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.